أنا دكتور خالد وليد، ربان سفينة النجاة إلى شواطئ بكة القدس. I am Dr. Khaled Waleed, the captain of the ship of salvation to the shores of Baka, Jerusalem.
All right, so you've sent us some really fascinating material about ancient Egypt and the Quran. And
it's going to be...
It looks like we're in for a truly unique deep dive here.
A very unique one.
We're talking about reinterpretations of scripture.
Yes.
Sacred geography, and even the structure of the universe itself.
It's definitely not your average history lesson.
Not at all.
No.
At the center of it all.
Right.
Is this image often referred to as the Egyptian goddess Nut. But according to the material you've shared, it's much more than just an artistic depiction.
Right. We're going to be looking at it as a complex diagram, potentially a note from the distant past.
A note.
Containing hidden messages.
That's intriguing.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin to unpack something like this?
Well, the material comes from Dr. Khaled Waleed, who argues that this nut image is like a visual representation of Quranic verses, revealing a hidden layer of meaning.
So we're already dealing with a pretty unconventional interpretation here.
Yes, very much so.
What exactly is Dr. Waleed trying to tell us through this image?
Well, he claims it holds clues about the creation of the universe, the roles of angels, even the true location of sacred sites.
Wow.
He also suggests it contains a message passed down from figures like Enoch, also known as Idris, in Islamic tradition, potentially even from Adam himself.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yes, it is a lot.
So let's start with the basics.
Sure.
How does Dr. Waleed even arrive at the idea that this image is a note?
He actually interprets the word nut itself as an acronym SWRT. Which refers to a type of record or note in his interpretation. He even goes as far as to call the image a Quranic surah in a picture.
So he's suggesting that ancient Egyptians were encoding Quranic knowledge into their artwork.
That's right.
That's a pretty bold claim.
Yes, very much so.
It is, and it raises some important questions about the connections between ancient Egyptian beliefs and the later revelation of the Quran.
That's right.
Definitely. Now, you mentioned that Dr. Waleed believes this note contains information about the creation of the universe. What exactly does he see in this image that leads him to that conclusion?
He points to the depiction of 4 bodies within the image which he believes represent the 7 heavens and 7 earths, described in the Quran.
Like a cosmological map of sorts.
Exactly. He cites verses like Quran 41.9-12, which describe the creation of these layered heavens and earths as evidence for this interpretation.
So we're talking about a multi-layer universe with 7 heavens above and 7 earths below.
That's Dr. Waleed's interpretation. And he believes this structure is visually represented in the nut image.
So we're starting to get a glimpse of how he's connecting this ancient Egyptian artwork to Quranic cosmology. But what about the true location of sacred sites you mentioned earlier? Where does that fit into all of this?
That's where things get even more controversial. Dr. Waleed claims that the true Masjid al-Haram, the holiest site in Islam, is not located in Mecca as traditionally understood.
Hold on, not in Mecca.
Not in Mecca.
But that's the center of the Islamic world where millions of Muslims perform the Hajj pilgrimage every year.
I know it's a very radical departure from conventional understanding. But Dr. Waleed bases his argument on specific verses in the Quran, like 2.144 and 2.149, which always refer to the Masjid al-Haram using the definite article al.
And what's the significance of this al?
Well, he contrasts this with the mention of the Aqsa Mosque in Quran 17.1, which appears only once and without the definite article.
So he's arguing that this grammatical distinction points to a different understanding of these sacred sites.
Exactly. He believes that the Aqsa Mosque isn't a separate structure. It actually refers to the furthest extent of the Masjid al-Haram itself, which he locates in Jerusalem, centered around the Dome of the Rock.
That's a completely different location and a very significant one in terms of religious history.
Absolutely. And this reinterpretation of sacred geography is a cornerstone of Dr. Waleed's overall thesis.
You mentioned earlier that this image potentially contains a message passed down from ancient figures like Enoch and Adam. How does he connect them to all of this?
Well, he sees them as part of a long lineage of knowledge transmission stretching back to the earliest periods of human history.
So he's suggesting that these ancient figures possessed knowledge that was later encoded in the Quran.
That's his argument, and he believes the nut image is one piece of evidence supporting this idea.
Okay, we're already diving deep into some pretty complex and controversial territory.
Very much so.
Where do we go from here?
Well, Dr. Waleed breaks down the nut image into 10 distinct sections, which he calls the 10 notes.
10 notes.
Each of these notes, he claims, reveals a piece of this hidden knowledge.
10 notes sounds like we've got a lot more ground to cover.
We do.
I'm ready to dive into those. What does the first note tell us?
Let's do it. Let's start with notes 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
These first few notes offer a glimpse into Dr. Waleed's interpretation of creation and the structure of the universe.
Okay.
Note 1 focuses on alhamd, which means praise, and its role as a creative force symbolized by the feminine.
So we're talking about a concept of divine feminine energy driving creation.
That's how Dr. Waleed interprets it. He connects this to verses like Quran 1.2 and 31.28, which emphasize the all-encompassing nature of God's praise.
Interesting. What about note 2?
Note 2 delves into the roles of angels,
Okay.
specifically Gabriel and Michael. As administrators of the cosmos, Dr. Waleed points to verses like Quran 2.98,
Okay.
which mentions both angels together, and 21.3, which describes the universe as a unified whole to support this idea.
So it sounds like he's building on the idea of a grand cosmic order with angels playing key roles in its maintenance.
Exactly. And note 3 ties directly into this by exploring the 6 days of creation mentioned in Quran 7.54 and 54.17. It also highlights the 8 angels of the throne referenced in Quran 41.9 to 12, suggesting a visual representation of these elements within the nut image.
Okay, so we're seeing a clear emphasis on creation and cosmic order in these first 3 notes.
Yes.
But how does this connect to the idea of a message from ancient times?
Well, remember, Dr. Waleed believes this knowledge was passed down through generations, potentially originating with figures like Enoch and Adam. He sees the nut image as a visual record of this ancient wisdom encoded long before the Quran was revealed.
That's a pretty profound implication.
Yeah.
It suggests a continuity of knowledge spanning across vast stretches of time.
It really does.
What else can you tell us about Dr. Waleed's interpretation of these notes?
Well, notes 4 and 5 delve into concepts of time.
Okay.
And the stages of creation, note 4, focuses on the 2 blows of the horn, which in Islamic tradition symbolize the end of the world and the day of judgment.
Okay, so we're moving from creation to the end times. How does he represent that visually in the image?
He points to 2 mirroring elements on opposite sides of the image, suggesting a cyclical view of time where the end is connected to the beginning.
Interesting.
This interpretation is supported by Quranic verses like 6.73 and 27.87, which describe the destructive and transformative power of these 2 blows.
That's a fascinating way to visualize the concept of time. It seems like Dr. Waleed is encouraging a different way of thinking about these traditionally linear events.
He is, and Note 5 builds on this by exploring the 10 stages of creation.
10 stages? Didn't the Quran mention the Earth's creation taking 6 days?
Yes, but Dr. Waleed believes this refers to the initial formation of the Earth. He interprets verses like 89.122 and 2.29, which mention the creation occurring over a period of 6 days, to mean that it took 4 additional days for the Earth to become habitable, bringing the total to 10.
Ah, I see. So he's including the preparation of Earth for life as part of the overall creation process.
Precisely. He sees these 10 stages reflected in the visual arrangement of Note 5 within the nut image.
This is starting to feel like a complex puzzle with each note offering another piece. Where do we go from here?
Note 6 takes us to a very intriguing concept, the idea of prophets before Adam.
Prophets before Adam. That seems to challenge the traditional understanding of Adam as the first human.
It does. Dr. Waleed points to verses like 3.42 and 3.45, which mention messengers sent to Mary, mother of Jesus, as evidence that she wasn't the first to receive divine communication. He suggests there were 26 of these figures, implying a long lineage of prophecy extending back beyond Adam.
So who were these pre-Adamic prophets? Does he offer any clues?
He describes them as elevated beings and suggests a transition from prophets of the jinn race to prophets of the human race.
The jinn, for those who might not be familiar, can you explain what that refers to?
The jinn are supernatural beings mentioned throughout the Quran. They exist alongside humans but are made of smokeless fire rather than clay. Dr. Waleed suggests that there was a period in creation when prophets were sent to the jinn, followed by a shift to human prophets, beginning with Adam.
This is definitely a unique interpretation. It seems to recontextualize our understanding of prophecy within a much broader timeline. What's next in this cosmic journey?
Note 7 focuses on a more familiar element, the 19 angels who guard hell.
Okay.
As described in verses like 74.2431.
19 angels specifically. Is there a particular significance to that number?
Dr. Waleed believes it's not arbitrary. He sees it as a fundamental aspect of the universe's structure. He even connects it to a Y-shaped symbol in the image, which he believes represents these guardians, as well as individuals who've achieved spiritual elevation and ascended to angelic status.
So he's suggesting humans can become angels. That's a pretty extraordinary concept.
It is, and it speaks to the potential for spiritual transformation that Dr. Waleed emphasizes throughout his interpretation.
Right.
He seems to be drawing parallels between these ascending figures and the prophets of earlier times, suggesting a continuity of divine guidance throughout history.
Okay, so we've covered creation, the end times prophets, angels. It's incredible how much Dr. Waleed is extracting from this single image. Where do we go from here?
Well, the remaining notes delve into even more fascinating territory, including the role of animals in creation, the true meaning of Egypt in the Quran, and the concept of Jerusalem as the center of the earth.
Animals, Egypt, Jerusalem, each note seems to open up a whole new layer of interpretation. I'm ready to dive into the rest. What can you tell us about the animals and their connection to the nut image?
Note 8 focuses on 4 specific types of animals mentioned in the Quran: sheep, goats, camels, and cows. Dr. Waleed interprets Quran 6.143144, which lists these animals to mean that they were actually lowered from heaven.
Lowered from heaven. So he's not just talking about their symbolic importance in the Quran, but their literal origin.
That's how he reads it. He even points to the specific way they're depicted in the nut image as evidence that they originated in the celestial realm before descending to earth.
Okay, so where does this leave us with Note 9?
Note 9 shifts the focus back to geography, specifically the concept of Egypt, as mentioned in the Quran. Dr. Waleed argues that the Egypt referred to in the Quran isn't modern-day Egypt at all. He calls the modern-day country El-Gipt, and suggests the Quranic Egypt actually refers to Palestine, specifically the Fertile Crescent region.
So he's reinterpreting not just sacred sites, but entire geographical regions based on his reading of the Quran.
He is, and this ties directly into his claim about the true Masjid al-Haram being located in Jerusalem.
It seems like all of these interpretations are interconnected, building upon one another to form a complete picture.
Exactly, and Note 10 brings everything together by highlighting what Dr. Waleed believes is the gateway to heaven, which he locates in Palestine, connecting it to the hidden tree or gash tree mentioned in Quran 17.1.
So Jerusalem as the center of the earth, the gateway to heaven located in Palestine, these are incredibly bold claims. But how does Dr. Waleed justify these reinterpretations? Does he offer any concrete evidence beyond his reading of specific Quranic verses?
He often refers to the concept of tadabbur, which emphasizes deep contemplation and reflection on the Quran. He believes that through careful study and contemplation, one can uncover these hidden layers of meaning within the text.
So it's not just about reading the Quran literally, but engaging with it on a much deeper level, searching for hidden connections and interpretations.
Precisely, and he believes this approach to the Quran is crucial for unlocking true spiritual growth and understanding.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the nut image itself to reinterpretations of sacred sites, geography, and even cosmology. What stands out to you as the most significant takeaway from Dr. Waleed's work?
I think what's most fascinating is this idea that there's a continuous thread of knowledge woven throughout human history, connecting ancient civilizations to later revelations. Dr. Waleed is essentially proposing a different model of understanding history, one where seemingly disparate elements like ancient Egyptian art and the Quran are deeply intertwined.
That's a powerful concept. Whether or not one agrees with all of his interpretations, it certainly encourages us to look beyond the surface and consider alternative perspectives on history and spirituality.
Absolutely. And that, I think, is the real value of a deep dive like this. It challenges us to question our assumptions, to explore unfamiliar ideas, and to engage in that process of tadabbur, a deep reflection that Dr. Waleed champions.
So for you listening, what does this all mean?
We've
explored a truly unique perspective on the Quran, ancient Egypt, and the nature of the universe itself.
It's been quite a journey.
But the real question is, how does this resonate with you? What new insights or questions has this deep dive sparked for you?
Perhaps you'll be inspired to take a closer look at the nut image yourself, to delve deeper into the Quranic verses we've discussed. Or simply to ponder the vastness of history and the mysteries it holds.
Whatever path you choose, we encourage you to keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
أنا دكتور خالد وليد. ربان سفينة النجاة إلى شواطئ بكة القدس. I am Dr. Khaled Waleed, the captain of the ship of salvation to the shores of Baka, Jerusalem.